Okay, so you want to know the secrets to writing a killer master's thesis in bioinformatics or computational biology, huh? Well, you've come to the right place. Get ready to dive deep.
We've got this awesome guide that basically lays it all out. It's like having a roadmap to navigate this whole academic adventure. And today we're going to break it down, extract the golden nuggets so you can really understand what it takes to write a strong thesis, regardless of your specific background.
It's like a cheat sheet, right? Cutting through all the noise and getting right to the heart of what really matters.
Exactly. And the guide breaks everything down into these three pillars: substance, structure, and style, which gives us a really clear way to tackle this whole topic.
Okay, so let's start with substance. I mean, what kind of research are we even talking about here?
Well, the possibilities are pretty huge. You could be working on something super biology focused, using computational tools to solve real-world biological problems.
Give me an example.
Sure. How about identifying the best types of fungi to use in regenerative agriculture? That kind of thing.
Interesting. So using computation to help solve an agricultural problem? Pretty cool.
Right. Or you could be more on the bioinformatics side, developing new computational methods and tools to answer big biological questions.
So like creating a new algorithm or something.
Exactly. Maybe develop a new model to understand the evolution of different types of fungi, to really dive into the evolutionary history.
Wow, that sounds pretty complex.
It can be, but that's the beauty of it. And then there's the informatics angle, where you're basically using biological problems to refine and validate new software or algorithms.
So more of a computer science focus.
In a way, yeah, you might be designing, say, text mining approaches to discover hidden properties of fungi. See how it all ties together.
It's like all these different fields are converging, right? So many possibilities. Now, the guide also talks about different types of master's theses, right?
Absolutely. There's the classic dissertation, which is all about formulating a hypothesis and then testing it through experiments.
That fungi in agriculture example, that would be a dissertation, right?
Spot on. Then you have the internship thesis, where you're actually embedded in a research institution, working in a lab setting, and contributing to their ongoing projects.
Hands-on experience. And what's that last one?
The project thesis. This one's about, achieving specific objectives within a defined time frame, using a particular methodology, and delivering concrete results, like creating a functional software package.
Okay, so right from the start, you've got some big decisions to make. But this guide helps you through it all.
Definitely. And one of the first things it asks you to consider is, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years, career-wise? It even gives you examples like the pharmaceutical industry, the health sector, a biology lab, the software industry, or even research.
Wow, it's really getting you thinking about the bigger picture, huh? How this thesis fits into your long-term goal.
Right. And to really understand where you fit in, the guide clarifies a key difference. PhD versus master's. A PhD is all about, groundbreaking discoveries, creating entirely new methodologies, generating completely new knowledge. It's really about pushing the boundaries of what we know.
While a master's, it's still about contributing new knowledge, but it's more focused on applying existing methodologies to, answer new questions.
Exactly. It's about building on what we already know and making significant progress within that framework. So you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but you are making a real contribution.
Okay, makes sense. So let's say you're ready to pick a research topic. What does the guide say about that?
It lays out a pretty practical process. Start with what truly interests you, what really sparks your curiosity within bioinformatics or computational biology. That passion is going to be key to staying motivated, especially when things get tough.
Because it will get tough, right? Research is no walk in the park.
You got it. The next step is to actually reach out to potential supervisors and schedule a meeting. This isn't just a formality. It's about starting a conversation, discussing your ideas, understanding their expectations.
It's about finding the right mentor who can guide you through this whole thing.
Absolutely. And of course, do your homework. The guide emphasizes reviewing recent articles in your areas of interest and also looking at previous master's theses. It's about understanding what's already been done, seeing where the gaps are, and identifying potential new directions.
Sounds like a lot of reading.
It can be, but it's all about finding your niche. And here's the cool part. You're not limited to some predefined list of topics. You have a lot of flexibility to carve your own path.
That's great, but there are some limitations, right? Like you have to align with what the faculty research, right?
Yeah, that's a practical consideration. And you'll need a co-supervisor from within the faculty, just some logistical stuff to keep in mind.
Okay, so you got your topic, you're doing your research, now what? How does this research actually get out there into the scientific community?
That's where publishing comes in. The guide stresses the importance of peer review. That's the gold standard for validating scientific work. When other experts in your field have reviewed and approved your findings, it gives your research way more credibility and impact.
It's like a stamp of approval from the scientific community.
Exactly. And when you're thinking about where to publish, talk to your supervisors. They'll have insights on the best journals in your area. The guide also mentions checking journal rankings to make sure your work reaches the right audience and has the biggest impact possible.
You want your research to be seen and read and built upon.
Right, and that leads us to a fundamental principle of science: replicability. If your research can't be independently verified by others, if they can't follow your methods and get similar results, then it raises questions about its validity.
It's about making sure you're finding it reliable, right? That anyone can follow your steps and reach the same conclusions.
Exactly. That's how we build trustworthy scientific knowledge. And the guide offers some really practical advice here. Document everything, every single step, every data source you use. It even jokes that without good documentation, you might not even be able to replicate your own work months down the line.
So organization is key. No cutting corners.
Yep, every detail matters. Now, remember how we talked about the guide being structured around substance, structure, and style? We've been talking a lot about substance, what your research is about, why it matters. But let's move on to structure. And the first thing you encounter is the abstract.
The abstract, the dreaded abstract. I remember stressing over that.
I hear you. But the guide makes a good point. It's often the first thing, and sometimes the only thing, that other researchers will read. Based on your abstract, they'll decide whether to dive into the whole paper or not.
So it's got to be good. More than just a summary, right?
Absolutely. Be specific. The guide says you need to clearly state the problem, the solution you're proposing, and the key findings. Concrete details, not vague generalities. That's what will grab their attention.
So get to the point. No fluff.
Right. Then we move into the main body of the thesis, which typically has these standard sections: introduction, related work, your work, results, discussion, conclusion, and bibliography. It's a logical flow, guiding the reader through your research journey.
Okay, let's break down a few of these. The introduction, for example. What makes a good introduction?
The guide says it's crucial for setting the stage. It's about providing context and outlining the roadmap for your entire thesis, and it recommends these subsections: motivation, problem, objective, methodology, results, and contributions.
Sounds pretty thorough. So motivation would be like, why is this research important? What real-world impact could it have?
Exactly. The guide gives a great example: the impact of intensive agriculture on climate change. That instantly shows why research in this area is relevant and important.
Makes sense. So then you have the problem. What's the specific challenge you're trying to solve?
Right. The guide mentions the difficulty of scaling up regenerative agriculture. That's a complex issue with huge implications.
Okay, so you've established why it matters. You've identified the problem. What's next?
The objective. What's the central question you're trying to answer, or the hypothesis you're testing, or the goal you're aiming for? The guide poses this question: can microorganisms improve the outcomes of regenerative agriculture? See how that sets the stage for the research.
It's like a laser focus on what you're trying to achieve. And then methodology, that's all about how you actually did the research, right?
Exactly. What approach did you take? What methods did you use? The guide gives an example: a systematic review of existing literature on regenerative agriculture combined with text mining techniques, all while following established guidelines like PRISMA. PRISMA, by the way, is a set of guidelines designed to ensure that systematic reviews are done, rigorously and transparently.
Got it. So it's not just about doing the research, it's about doing it the right way. And then you present the results, obviously.
Of course. What did you discover? How do your findings answer your research question? The results can be quantitative, like a measured increase in carbon sequestration or crop yield, or qualitative, like farmer observations about improved soil structure. It's about presenting the evidence.
And last but not least, contributions. What did you create as a result of this research?
Right. Did you develop a new software tool, a database, a set of terms? Maybe you published an article or wrote a technical report. It's about showcasing the tangible outputs of your hard work.
So the introduction is basically like the trailer for your thesis, getting people excited to dive into the main feature.
Perfect analogy. Now, moving on to related work, the guide is very clear. This isn't just a random list of papers you've read. It's about showing how existing research connects to your specific thesis. It's about building a solid foundation for your own work.
It's about showing that you understand the landscape, right? That you're aware of what's already out there.
Exactly. You need to explain the key concepts, any external software or tools you used, and provide a solid overview of the current state of the art in your research area. And then you need to clearly show how your research builds on or differs from this existing work, highlighting its novelty and importance.
So it's about connecting the dots, right? Showing how your research fits into the bigger picture.
Yes, and the guide also warns against relying on legacy citations, articles that might be frequently cited but are actually outdated or maybe weren't critically evaluated in the past.
So just because it's been published doesn't mean it's still accurate or relevant.
Right. The guide uses this example of a 1909 article about using mercury to treat tuberculosis. I mean, that's just not how we do things anymore. You don't want to build your arguments on shaky foundations.
So always double check your sources.
Always. It also warns against citing things like opinion letters, which haven't been rigorously peer-reviewed, or even retracted articles. The guide mentions a case of a highly cited Nature article that was later retracted. That's a reminder to be cautious and do your due diligence.
Okay, so related work is all about building a strong, reliable foundation for your own research. What about the work section? That's where you really get into the nitty-gritty, right?
Absolutely. This is the heart of your thesis, where you describe your research process in detail. The guide suggests a top-down approach, starting with the overall design and then drilling down into the specifics.
And visuals can be helpful here, right? Like diagrams, flowcharts, anything that helps make your methods clear.
For sure, it's about making your research accessible and understandable. Now, the work section might also include your results and discussion, or they might be separate chapters. It depends on the specific structure you choose.
Okay, so flexibility within the framework, but the goal is to showcase your research process and demonstrate its rigor and merit, right?
Exactly. And the guide advises against relying solely on statistical results to make your case. It's about providing context and explaining the implications of those results. That brings us to the topic of e-values and p-values, those statistical measures we often see in research papers.
Ah, yes, the dreaded p-value. It's all about statistical significance, right?
Right, but the guide emphasizes that they're not the be-all and end-all. It explains the common p-value thresholds, 0.05, 0.01, and the more stringent 0.001, and how they're used to assess the statistical significance of findings.
So lower p-value means more statistically significant, right?
Generally, yes, but the guide uses this interesting analogy. Winning the lottery twice. The odds of that happening are astronomically small, right? But if it did happen, wouldn't you be suspicious?
Like maybe something's fishy.
Exactly. The guide even references an Associated Press news article about lottery scams to illustrate the point. Sometimes real-world context can trump purely statistical interpretations.
So a low p-value doesn't automatically guarantee a true conclusion?
Right. The guide reminds us that statistics are a tool, but they need to be interpreted carefully within the broader context of the research.
Okay, so p-values with a grain of salt. Got it. What about the conclusion? That's where you wrap it all up, right?
Exactly. The guide says it should focus on summarizing your work, comparing your findings to your initial goals, and reflecting on the research journey. It's also the place to discuss potential future research directions that emerged from your work, any key lessons you learned, and the challenges you faced along the way.
So it's not just about ending the story, it's about pointing towards the next chapter.
Exactly. The guide even includes this quote from George Bernard Shaw: "Science never solves a problem without creating 10 more." It's a good reminder that research is an ongoing process.
Always more to discover. Now, last but not least, the bibliography.
Ah, yes, the all-important list of references. The guide stresses the importance of meticulous record-keeping and accurate citations. It's about giving credit where credit is due and avoiding plagiarism, which is super important.
Academic honesty, the cornerstone of scientific integrity?
Absolutely. The guide suggests using tools like the Cite option in databases like Google Scholar, but it also emphasizes manually checking and completing all the details. Author names, year of publication, journal name, everything.
Accuracy is key. Now we've covered substance and structure. What about style? What does the guide say about how to write a good thesis?
One of the first things students worry about is the length. How many pages should it be? The guide says the ideal length is simply the minimum required to explain your research clearly and thoroughly so others can understand and replicate your work.
So it's not about hitting a certain page count. It's about quality over quantity.
Exactly. The guide actually cautions against making it too long. It can dilute your message and bury your key contributions. The best advice is to look at other theses in your field and, most importantly, talk to your supervisor. They'll know what's appropriate.
Okay, good to know. What else about style?
The guide emphasizes the importance of writing clear, concise, scientific text. It's not a novel. It's a scientific document. So avoid ambiguity, keep your sentences short and focused, and don't overuse adjectives.
Like instead of saying the proposed solution is highly effective, which is vague, you need to back it up with data and evidence.
Exactly. Let the data speak for itself. And remember, this is your thesis, your individual contribution. So the guide suggests being mindful of using we without a clear reference. Instead, use phrases like this thesis or I to emphasize your own role.
Okay, so take ownership of your work. Now, what about language? English or Portuguese?
That's a good question. The guide discusses the pros and cons of both. Writing in English gives you a wider audience, and you don't have to translate scientific terms. It also makes it easier to integrate text from English language journals.
English is kind of the lingua franca of science, right?
It is. But the guide acknowledges that writing in your native language can make it easier to express complex ideas and might lead to fewer errors.
So it's a trade-off.
Yeah, and the guide points out that AI translation tools are getting better all the time, so the advantage of writing in your native language might be shrinking.
Interesting. Now, what about using tools like text processing software and AI?
The guide sees those as helpful tools, not replacements for your own thinking. Text processing can help with organization and formatting, and many of these tools can be used locally, which is good for privacy.
So it's about leveraging technology to make your life easier.
Right, and AI can be like a research assistant, helping you gather data, summarize information, and maybe even suggest different phrasings. But it's not a substitute for critical thinking and original thought.
And professors, they're there to guide you, not to give you all the answers, right?
Exactly. The guide beautifully summarizes the core of learning as critical thinking plus creativity. It's about using your own mind to solve problems and create something new.
And in the end, your master's thesis is a testament to your own effort, your individual contribution to the field.
That's why the guide encourages you to really dive in, be dedicated, and even find joy in the process. It's challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
So to sum it all up, this guide gives you a clear roadmap for writing a successful master's thesis. It's all about substance, structure, and style.
Exactly. And by understanding these key elements, you're well on your way to navigating the complexities of academic research and writing in these dynamic fields.
It's exciting to think about the future of research, especially with AI becoming more and more powerful. But as researchers, it's our responsibility to use these tools wisely and ethically, and to never lose sight of the importance of critical thinking and creativity.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between leveraging technology and ensuring that our research is a true reflection of our own unique perspectives and insights. What a fascinating time to be in these fields.